This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a friend out of Kansas City, Missouri, Miss Sadie Elliot. And she currently at the Herzog Foundation is with this new title, and I have it up in front of me here, the Herzog Foundation Institute Director. And so I had to make sure I checked with her beforehand because she just got a new title within the last month or so. And so she is awesome. She's doing some amazing things with the Herzog Foundation. And if you guys have been listening for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of Herzog and what they're doing over there, the classes and trainings. And of course, they're a sponsor of the podcast. They do a lot of really cool things. So we're going to have a podcast all about the Herzog Foundation, who they are, what they do. But of course, instead of me talking all about it, we're going to have Sadie talk about it because she's going to do a lot better at it than I would. So before we jump into all things Herzog, I do want to pass it off to Sadie to introduce herself. So Sadie, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Mitchell. Really glad to be on with you. I have loved listening to your podcast, and I feel honored to join the ranks between some of your most recent guests have been just some of my favorite people and dear mentors. So thank you for having me on. I'm honored.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving the time. I would love to kind of get your story of how, even just how you got to the Herzog Foundation. Before we even jump into what all the Herzog Foundation is and what they do, how did you get to where you are today, Sadie?
That is a question that would take a long time to answer. I will go back to my earliest years. My parents are and were extreme supporters, lovers, fanatics of Christian education. And so when they were deciding, my brother and I's, what school we would go to when we were starting to enter into school, they are both graduates of public education, but they started to look at their options. And when they were enrolling my older brother at a Christian school, this story, in my opinion, has kind of marked the trajectory of our family's lives and our family's passion for Christian education. But when they were enrolling my brother into the local small Christian school here in Kansas City, the principal said, John and Julie, it is not our job to educate your child. And at first that made my parents, I think, a little angry or upset or confused because they're like, we're going to write a check for how many thousands of dollars to this school compared to the free school down the street. And you say it's not your job to educate my child. And the principal's point was it's the school's job to partner with you as parents in the education of your children. But ultimately, the parents are the primary educators of children. And so from that point on, my parents were hooked as far as believing in and caring for Christian education. And so fast forward, my brother and I are about to graduate middle school, the 7th, 8th grade era, and there was no Christian high school in the area. And so my parents and a handful of faithful, group of faithful parents started a Christian high school here in the Kansas City area. And so I say all this to say I was born and raised Christian education. I have experienced the blood, sweat, and tears of a Christian school startup, of a Christian school split, a church school split, and in many ways, I see myself as a product of Christian education. And so about the time that I was graduating high school, I started to just really understand what a privilege it was to have the opportunity to attend a private Christian school for my entire upbringing, and realizing just how few students in our nation have access to that, especially students who happen to be born in a different zip code than I was, or didn't have the opportunity to be raised by two parent household. And so my heart really in those early stages, because of how much I loved my Christian school experience and how much my teachers are a part of my testimony, my heart in those early years were really captured for Christian education and wanting to make it more accessible to kids who didn't have a background or an upbringing like mine. And so I went King's College for my undergraduate in philosophy, politics, and economics with a minor in business. I just couldn't choose. So I went through all four of those, but I knew upon graduating college that I really wanted to work in the nonprofit sector. So after college, I worked in the nonprofit sector for a few years, mostly in donor development and marketing. And then enrollment as well. I worked for my alma mater. And I worked for another nonprofit as well here in the Kansas City area. And I just realized the need for bringing best practices of business and finance and strategic planning into the nonprofit space. So I went and got my MBA with the hopes of doing just that, of coming back after my MBA to train nonprofit leaders and how to lead well. I think very often in the nonprofit sector, we see a lot of good intentions. We hear a lot of amazing stories, but sometimes we fall short when it comes to the simple practices of running an organization or a high-performance team. And so right about that time in 2020, 2021, after I was wrapping up my master's program, the Herzog Foundation was getting started. And the board didn't at that time know what the exact programs that we were going to run would be, but they knew that training the leaders of Christian schools was going to be a priority. And so at that point, I came on to the Herzog Foundation team. The ask was, Sadie, we don't know what your job's going to be, or what, I was a program manager, I think, when I first came on, with no programs. And so it was a huge blessing to be able to come on with Dr. Daryl Jones, who's the president here, and I know you've had him on as well. And the two of us were the first few employees. And since then, we have grown to, I believe, we're up towards 50 employees now, with a handful of major initiatives for the K-12 space and beyond. And I'm really excited to dive into that with you today. It's a huge privilege to get to give back to Christian education, because Christian education means so much to me and my story.
I love that. I love your story. And now I'm like, man, Herzog definitely picked a good one to have you come on to Herzog Foundation of what they're doing and what you're doing now with your role. I didn't know your story until now. So I appreciate you sharing that, because that makes me know they definitely have the right person for the job. And what a great, I'm sure there's been some duds in hiring probably with the Herzog Foundation that they've had, but I feel like anybody I've met at the Herzog Foundation, like, man, how did they score that person? How did they snatch that person? And I feel like that's been very much like a God thing, a Holy Spirit thing. I feel like of like God putting the right people in place to get the Herzog Foundation to where they are. And Daryl Jones being, I know, a pastor for years, and then suddenly leading this nonprofit. His story is really cool as well. So thank you for sharing that, because I did not know that about you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the Lord's been faithful, and our board is very entrepreneurial. So they just attract a certain type of person that wants to build the car as we're driving it.
That's awesome. And it's good to have people on board that are okay with the car being built as the car is getting driven. So it's good. Before we jump into all things Herzog, I totally forgot to ask you the question I ask everyone. I can't believe I almost forgot. And so let's start with this one, and then we'll dive into Herzog. So if I was to visit you guys there in Kansas City area, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience the Kansas City, Missouri area?
Well, the answer to the first part of that question is very straightforward. I'm sorry for my friends in Texas, Memphis, or North Carolina, but we have some of the best barbecue in the world here in Kansas City. And so by far, you got to try some burnt ends and brisket at any number of amazing local Kansas City barbecue joints. Some of those places are an experience in and of themselves. So one of my favorites is actually in a gas station. And then obviously, I mean, a Chiefs game or Royals, but the Chiefs right now are pretty fun to watch, huh?
Yeah, except during that last Super Bowl, geez,
we don't need to talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, I can poke fun all I want, but I'm back here like my Bears helmet, and obviously we don't know how to play football right now, but one day we'll be hopefully competitive.
But Chicago got a pope, so
We did, and Green Bay didn't get a pope, so I think I'll take that as a win for
there you
Chicago.
go.
All right. Well, I've heard nothing but good things about barbecue in Kansas City, and I love a good barbecue. My wife's from North Carolina, so she loves vinegar barbecue, but I just can't get on board with vinegar barbecue. So I know I'd be more of a fan of a Missouri type of barbecue or a Texas barbecue or whatever. But
Yes.
I know some fists can be thrown with that argument. So we'll move on to Herzog at that point. So
Sounds good.
tell me a little bit. Obviously, you shared just a little bit about it, but let's dive in a little bit more. So, who is the Herzog Foundation? Why is this? Who is this Herzog guy? Why did this organization start? Let's kind of dive into that first.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's always a huge honor to get to share a little bit about the story and legacy of Stan Herzog, who is the reason that we are able to invest in the sector of Christian education. So Stan was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur, but most importantly, he was a father and a grandfather and a patriot. He loved this country and the values that America stands for. And interestingly, during his lifetime, probably the bulk or the majority of his philanthropy was targeted towards political efforts. And so he was a big player in politics here locally in the state of Missouri, but also nationally, because he loved this country and cared for things like hard work, human dignity, and individual freedom and individual responsibility. But at some point, as he was considering what he would leave his wealth to when he passed, there was a little bit of not a shift so much as kind of a rise in vision. And his son, Jake Herzog, says it best. His son, Jake, says that at one point, Stan realized the heart of the problem in this country was a problem of the heart. And so Stan wanted to get upstream from all this downstream chaos that we're seeing, whether that be in politics or culture or even the church. And so Stan believed that Christian education is an upstream solution to so much of what we're seeing downstream. And so he decided many, many years prior to his passing that he was going to leave the majority of his wealth to K-12 Christian education here in the U.S. But those three things, that was about all that he specified for the foundation. He didn't say give grants. He didn't say build buildings. He didn't say do leadership trainings or startup funding. But he did hand select our board, who are just incredible individuals with the vision. They knew Stan personally. And so Stan wanted people whom he knew were value aligned and knew how he thought, how he operated to ultimately execute on this trust. With the money that he left. And so at the Herzog Foundation, we not only honor Stan or seek to honor Stan in who we give to, which is K-12 Christian education, but also in how we give. We want to honor him with the way he thought. He was a very successful businessman. He invested in the people around him. He questioned the status quo. He didn't care if the people he was hiring had certain degrees or went through the rigmarole of whatever bureaucracy the sector had. He wanted people who he trusted, who he knew worked hard, and who ultimately just proved themselves in the Herzog Corporation company. And so we wanted to take these ideas from Stan of, okay, how do we invest in people? How do we build leaders? How do we question the status quo? And how do we think very entrepreneurially? Stan was definitely a guy who he did not buy into this saying that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like he was relentless on there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to innovate. There's a better way to serve the client and also just go above and beyond. And so we wanted to adopt all of these characteristics that we found in just the way that Stan went about his business and apply them to how we give in the Christian education sector. And so that's a little bit about Stan. He passed in 2019. And upon his passing, the board started building this foundation, building our headquarters, determining our mission statement, which is, I think, really important. As we start to talk about the programs, our mission statement is to catalyze and accelerate the development of quality, Christ-centered K-12 education so that families and culture flourish. And every word in that statement was meticulously chosen because it means something really personal to us here at the foundation and how we run our programs.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. Man, what a story and what a legacy he's leaving. And so I'm glad you guys have jumped on in to do what you guys are doing and leading and growing. And I feel like it's rare now, and even like the people we interview on the podcast and the people I meet in our space and what we're doing, that it's rare that I find somebody who has not heard of the Herzog Foundation. Like they might not know everything you guys do, but they've like, oh, I've heard about them, or I know they have something, and what is it, and I can share with them more. It's so, think about just in that short amount of time, what we talking, five ish years or so, that the legacy already from him is like spread across the United States for this K-12 space, which is really cool and really exciting. So I love what you guys have done and what you guys have built in the 5 years, and obviously God's hand has been on that. I think most people can see that, which is really, really cool. And I've seen obviously my own success stories come out of it from the schools we've talked to. You guys have been able to help them. So with that, obviously that creation has come. You guys started to go, well, how do we offer? Like, how do we help these schools? Do we just hand out free money to every school out there and then hope for the best? I know that's obviously not what you guys do, but what are some of these things you guys have started to offer to help further K-12 education, Christian education in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's quite humbling to think about how much ground we've covered in 5 years, and it's just the biggest blessing of my life to be a part of it. But let me take you back to that 2019 to 2021. So Stan Herzog passed in 2019, and then Daryl was the first hire, and he started January 1st, 2021. And so if you can think about that time frame, there was this little thing called COVID that completely disrupted the US educational sector. It just totally turned it on its head. And so in that time frame, the board's starting to think to themselves, at first when COVID hit, are we going to have to use the funds just to float schools? Because who's going to continue to pay tuition for schools that are not in session, right? And then clearly, very quickly, that shifted to quite the opposite. Christian schools were either staying open or the first ones to return to in-person learning. And not only that, but many families, Christian families, saw what was being taught or what wasn't being taught when the classroom came to their kitchen table. And so that shift from 2019 to 2021 in Christian education, I think, has caused the biggest moment for Christian education in our lifetime, maybe in the history of U.S. Christian education, but I'll definitely say our lifetime. And so with that, what the board said in 2021, when Daryl Jones, our president, started, was they tasked Daryl with traveling the country, meeting with leaders from colleges to accrediting agencies to Christian schools and beyond across the country. And the task was, how do we add value in this sector? Because we could build buildings, we could fund tuition assistance, and those were and are the two biggest requests we get. Many people think, when they think foundation, they think of a grant-making foundation, but the board knew from day one that we wanted to be a programmatic foundation. We wanted to build the capacity of the sector. And so with that, we started to identify, first of all, where is there momentum in the space? So going back to our mission statement, catalyzing and accelerating are very specific terms. We wanted to find the momentum that's happening in the K-12 Christian education space, and we wanted to get behind it. And so that was kind of phase one. Where's the momentum happening that we can get behind? And how can we continue to stoke the fire that is burning across the US, the attention from parents that's on Christian education? And then secondarily to that is looking at the sector and saying, where are the gaps? So where are Christian schools not receiving support or training or resources on that we could help them? Or what hurdles might populate or pop up that would get in the way of the growth that we're seeing in the sector and the movement? So a really unique challenge, right? So find the momentum, what's working, what Christian education is doing really well, get behind it, and then find the barriers to providing quality and access. And again, in our mission statement, we don't just say that we want to fund and that we want to catalyze and accelerate Christian education. We say that we want to catalyze and accelerate the development of quality Christian education. And that word's really important to us because we believe that Christian education should set the bar of educational excellence in this country. And until Christian education is doing that, we're not going to relent. And so that was the challenge. Year one is identify what we can catalyze and identify what we can create to step into the gaps. And so very quickly we started to design and develop programs based around, again, what we were hearing in the sector. This isn't from a few of us with the board sitting in a room and saying, yeah, we should launch a training on financial management and we should launch an online program for startup schools. We put our ear to the ground and we listened to the leaders in the sector. And what we heard were a handful of themes that really populated that first year. First, the one theme that we kept hearing that was really concerning to us and still is, it's what keeps me up at night, is that many people say that the average tenure of a head of school is somewhere around the 2.5 to 3 year mark. That's really concerning because you can't build institutional trust if you continue to turn over the leader. So that was concerning. We heard a lot of school leaders who just said that they felt isolated. They felt like they're on an island, that the problems of a school are so unique that they didn't feel like they had someone to rely on. And if you think about it, as a leader of a Christian school, consider a head of school at a church school. It's quite likely that maybe their good friend that they might confide in is on the board or a parent, and their pastor's their boss. And they, the spouses of leaders are saints. They just get so much thrown on them. And so it's a very, very isolating role. So those were a few of the gaps, as well as we just kept hearing that there were conferences, but not really high quality professional development. And so those are a few of the gaps. And then a few of the areas that we just felt like there was a lot of momentum, a lot of movement, was obviously enrollment growth, startups. Oh my word, there's so, like, since 2020, the number of startup schools that have just popped up in every type of area across this country, from urban city centers to very rural areas, and just the plethora of different models of schools that are starting is so encouraging. We can get more into that, but those were a few of the things that we thought, let's catalyze where the growth in the movement is there. And so with all of that information, with all of that data, we started some programs in 2021, and they've just continued to grow. today. So I'm happy to talk specifically, but I would say some of our big buckets include the Herzog Foundation Institute, which I have the privilege of running, and that covers primarily right now trainings. And I know we'll spend a bulk of our time talking about trainings, but it also includes our new efforts for teacher certification, as well as our efforts focusing on civics and America's 250th birthday, which is next year, which is super exciting. So that's the Herzog Institute. We also have Schoolbox, which you're obviously a partner of, and that is our online program for school founders and edupreneurs, if you will. And then we have our marketing, our media, and our communications, which includes everything from The Lion, which is a really brilliant online publication and news outlet, to podcasts like this one and many more. We have other initiatives, student camps, and Excellence in Teacher of the Year awards. But the three big ones I would say would be our news media, our startup programs, and our institute.
So what you're saying is you guys don't really offer much. You guys don't really do
That's right.
things, you know?
No, bare minimum. We just, yeah.
Just sitting back, twiddling your thumbs in Missouri, you know, thinking about
That's
what
right.
you can do. You guys are doing a ton, and I want to reference go back to the head of school thing you mentioned. That's something we have seen with like head of schools we've interviewed, and then just talking to the schools we meet, where it reminds me of like pastors I've talked to, where they kind of also feel almost like alone, like they're shepherding the flock, they're leading this, but they like, who do I go to to share like what's going on? Because they can't go to like, even head of schools. I feel like a lot of times we talk to them, they can't go to their board because the board's like, wait, you're struggling in these areas, or you don't think you're equipped for this, and then like, so who do they go to? And so, man, I'm glad you guys have seen that and are pouring into that in different ways. We've thought about what are things we could even do to help just give them a mastermind, a community of other head of schools to make them go like, hey, you're not alone in this. There's other people around you that love you and support you. And so I'm glad you guys saw that. And it's something I feel like is almost fairly obvious now as the years have gone on, that's a huge piece, even with the teacher part. But I feel like teachers can kind of be there for each other. It's a little different, obviously, for the head of school. So are you guys mainly for the head of schools? If we have some listening, what are some of those specific resources for them if they do feel like I'm alone on an island, I need some help, or I'm about to just quit and go somewhere else? What are some of those resources you guys have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a snapshot into the training side of the Institute. In the training programs, we have three main series. So we have kind of our bread and butter, what I'd say is our foundational series, and that is the leadership development series. That there are 6 trainings in that, and that is geared towards the leadership of Christian schools. I'll go more in depth into that here in a minute. Secondly, we have the organizational development series, and that is more of the infrastructure of our schools. So some programming, some systems, security. I'm happy to talk about some of those as well. And those are the 2 series that heads of schools mostly attend, is our org series and our leadership series. Our third series is specific to educators. We call it our teacher development series, but we believe that anybody who works or coaches or volunteers at a Christian school is in fact an educator with influence on every child and student's life in that school. And so the teacher part is a little bit of false advertising. That one's open to anybody who works at a Christian school. And so for heads of schools in particular, we would encourage you to first look at the leadership development series. This was developed in that first year. Like I said, we were ears to the ground. We had a small advisory team of heads of schools. We had Doc Cheryl, we had Jason Rachels of Schools United. They're doing incredible things. Yvonne Forwerda at the Van Lunen Center. So we had some really amazing people come around us in the early days and help us develop this leadership series. And they said, if you could solve for these 6 topics, that you would see a huge return on your investment of your philanthropic dollars. So those 6, and somewhat in order of how I would recommend them, are spiritual formation, board leadership, culture building, and employee engagement, strategic leadership, donor development, and marketing and enrollment. And those 6 make up what I would call our executive MBA in Christian school leadership. But What I want to say before we get into any specifics of the trainings, from a content perspective, is I actually think that the content of the trainings, while hugely valuable, is not the most important thing that we can provide at our trainings. It's actually the ability to provide an off-site training retreat where school leaders unplug from work. We require they turn their emails off, that they don't answer phone calls, they don't schedule meetings, and we give them time and space to learn and to rest. And by rest, what I mean is to really uh, reignite and reconnect with their why. Not so much that we're sending them golfing or anything like that, but we do give a lot of downtime and a lot of time to connect with other heads of schools, as well as to receive individualized attention from our coaches. So these are very high touch trainings where we de-emphasize the lecture, we de-emphasize a sit and get model. And it's very much how can we help you apply the best practices in your context? And how can we identify the barriers, whether that be organizational barriers like a dysfunctional board or a certain employee or founder that might be causing some disruption, or personal barriers like the lady I spoke with this must have been 2 years ago. And I asked her the morning of the third day, most of our trainings are 3 days. I asked her the morning of the third day, I said, how'd you sleep last night? And she told me, she started crying. She said, I slept last night for the first time in 6 months. And she said, I feel overwhelmed. But she said, I feel overwhelmed because I now know what I need to do. Whereas the last 6 months, I felt overwhelmed because I felt like it was all out of my control. And so something like that, when you hear that, that is a change that we've made in that leader's life that is going to last far and beyond a few extra lectures, which is why we really emphasize time with one another, time with coaches, and honestly, why we emphasize training in beautiful spaces as well. The chairman of our board from day one said that our trainings will not be cookies and Kool-Aid in a church basement. That while we're not going to be extravagant, we have the resources to provide excellent trainings. And so whether we train at our new site in Santa Barbara, California, or whether we train at the Museum of the Bible in DC, or at our beautiful training facility that we built here outside of Kansas City, we really care about the holistic experience that a guest has with us, from the food to natural light to time outside to time with other educators.
And I can agree with that because I've been to a couple and they are beautiful. And I feel like anytime you're like, oh, I wish there was something that they had, you probably have it. I remember it was like, oh, they had cold drinks. You had cold drinks, you had snacks. There was always something to eat and munch on. Obviously, the quality of the stuff you guys put out is incredible and excellent. And, I think you should add on to this too. With all of these things you guys put on, you charge people a lot of money to come to all these trainings, like thousands upon thousands of dollars. You charge all these schools to come, right? Right, Sadie? It can't be free, right?
Right, right. That would be too good to be true, and someone would surely try to sell them something or
Mm-hmm.
offload a timeshare while they're with us. No, we. It's so funny that you mentioned this. So our trainings are our investment. They're our philanthropic investment in schools and school leaders. And so every guest that gets accepted into one of our trainings, we cover the entire cost of the training except for travel to the location. And sometimes there's maybe one meal, like a dinner or something, that the school will need to pick up. But aside from those two costs, we wanted to make high quality professional development accessible to Christian schools that very often have little to no professional development budget. But in the early years, in 2021, when we first started running trainings, I was literally cold calling heads of schools. And, you've said that most people know about Herzog at this point, which I'm tremendously grateful for. But in the early days, no one knew Herzog. They were like, what's a Herzog? Is it Whitey Herzog? Who's Herzog? And so I was cold calling heads of schools, or not even heads of schools, just receptionists. I was finding the number online to the front desk, and I'd say, hi, my name is Sadie Elliot. I work for the Herzog Foundation. We're a new foundation here to support Christian education. We're putting on this free event But the moment you use free, you're like, but I promise it's good quality, or I promise we're not going to sell you anything. And so I'm so thankful for those schools that stepped out in faith in the early year, 2021, 2022, to come to our trainings and check us out, because the word of mouth has just spread all across this country. But no, it is very financially accessible. And that is why we run trainings across the nation as well, is for many schools, a flight or two is still out of reach. And so we wanted to take trainings across the country so that at least there's a training within driving distance from every school.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
the classes and trainings you guys do, I'd love to hear a little bit about, I know you have a lot of them, and I don't know if we have time to dive into maybe all of them in depth, but I know you kind of mentioned some of the names. Maybe we go over, hey, what are some of the, and again, you kind of already mentioned this one too, I guess. I'm answering my own questions of like, hey, you should go to this one, this one, this one.
Yeah.
Or what are maybe like the top three? You're like, hey, if you had to pick only one or three to just try it, maybe they've never even tried one out. Well, is there a couple that you would say, I would focus on this one? Go ahead, and then how do they find out about these trainings too? I know there's a place they can find those online.
Yeah, great question. So in 2021, we had one training. We had donor development. And then in 2022, we launched, I think, 4 new ones. So then we had 5. In 2023, I launched a couple. Maybe I had maybe 7. Last year, we launched nearly 14 new trainings. And so at this point, we have 23 different types of trainings. And the reason I want to just like start with that picture, that overview, is to say that whatever school leader is struggling with most, there's a training for them. And so I'm happy to share the 2 or 3 that I've heard from school leaders that they've said these are the ones that every school leader needs to get to. But the reality of it is each school is dealing with something very uniquely and deeply contextualized to their space, their sector, their state, whatever that might be. So I just want to encourage school leaders, if you're listening to this, to say, check out all of the different ones on our website, herzogfoundation.com. You can get an overview of all the trainings, who we recommend coming, what the training's about, and you can see all the dates and locations on the website. And so I say that to say, you can also reach out to us to say, hey, here's my unique situation. And we're happy to listen to you in confidence and act a little bit as a sounding board and help you find the right pathway to access the best professional development for you, but also for your team. And so, man, the top ones, I have to be careful with this because I have so many coaches. At this point, we have about a portfolio of about 60 coaches who train on these different trainings. We've always said that as the foundation, we are not the experts, but we have the opportunity to convene the experts. And so at every training, we have somewhere around 5 to 7 coaches who are experts and practitioners in the space. And I have to be careful saying which trainings are my favorite because they'll watch this and I'll get a text, Mitchell, that says, why didn't you say my training? But I love all 23 trainings dearly, and our coaches are some of the most incredible people that I've met. But let me speak to the ones that we have the most demand for, which seems to indicate the ones that the schools at least perceive to need most. Our largest training attended by far is our donor development training. And that training is wonderful. We have a partner, Zach Clark, at Leadership Development Leadership Coaching, and it really demystifies donor development. Because let's be real, no one at a Christian school got in this to ask people for money, right? They got in this for the kids because they're passionate about education. Not necessarily because they want to be cultivating donors. But what we're able to do at that training is really uniquely paint the story that as a leader of a Christian school, it is our job to rally people behind the unique story. And of course, you do a lot of that as far as helping schools articulate their story and their value proposition. So how do you do that? But in a way that attracts and reaches donors. So that is a big one for a lot of schools. What I will say is that we have a lot of schools who come to donor development thinking that fundraising is going to be their silver bullet, that it's going to be the way out of whatever financial or enrollment struggles that they have. or, because they need the building, they need the land, they need whatever that might be. And so donor development's amazing for any school in any situation. But oftentimes when we get schools that are donor development training and we start to talk with them, the root cause of whatever their hurdle or their struggle as an organization is right now, more often than not, is not solved by donor development. So that's why I lead to these other trainings, like our board leadership training. So the culture of our school is top down. So the culture set at the board level between the board and the head of school is going to be what is replicated throughout the institution. And so that training is hugely important for the longevity and sustainability of our schools. We do require the board chair or pastor, if you're a church school, to attend with the head of school. And it's an incredible experience. So I would definitely encourage board leadership. Similarly to that, our spiritual formation training, if we're Christian schools and we don't get spiritual formation right, man, I don't want to be the one to stand before the Lord and answer that question, right? There's the verse in Matthew that talks about being before the Lord and saying, Lord, Lord, but I did your work, right? I did all of these things in your name. And the Lord saying, but I didn't know you. And that is terrifying to me, to say one day I don't want to stand before the Lord and say, but Lord, Lord, I was in Christian education. And the Lord say, yeah, but you didn't know me and I don't know you. So that a lot of things keep me up at night, Mitchell. That's a theme throughout this podcast. But I think it's so important that if we're going to use Christian as our middle name, that is more than a Christian curriculum or a chapel once a week. Sure. And so our spiritual formation training really helps contextualize that the academic and intellectual pursuit is in and of itself a part of the spiritual formation of a child and of a soul. So really encourage those. I would say board and spiritual formation are kind of your foundational. We've got to get those things right.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. I've met many schools, and I know you, I'm sure, have, obviously, in the last 4 years or so of this, but I've met schools that I wouldn't have known that they were a Christian school unless it was in their name. Like talking with them and talking with the head of schools or talking with people going, oh, okay, interesting. Like it's not a core, it's in the name, but it's not a core piece of who they are and what they do, which is super concerning, especially if parents are obviously paying for that with like, well, that's the big piece they're pushing. And you think about, I think I learned this stat from you guys. I think it's like, what's 15,000 hours a student or whatever it is spends in education. It's like, well, who do you want pushing that agenda on them or pushing that worldview on them? Would you rather it come from just the general public school system, or do you want it from the Christian worldview? And obviously, you Christians would rather it be from the Christian worldview, of course. And so my encouragement for those that are listening, if you haven't obviously heard of the Herzog Foundation, please check them out. But if you are thinking like, oh, I'm good, I don't need any training, I'm good, I'd really check yourself on that and say, there's always room to improve. There's always room to be better. And so look at these trainings, like they're offering them free. You just have to get there. And obviously they're doing a great job with what they're doing. So please like always make yourself better. Because if you make yourself better, especially if we're talking the head of school here, it is a trickle down effect that gets poured into the kids and the kids into the families. And it's just this huge thing. If you're good, it's going to help the rest of the school and the foundation of the families and the students be better as well. So please check out what they're doing, because obviously it's really cool what they're doing and what they've made available to you. So there are really no excuses, especially if you're like, oh, I don't have the money or the means. Like you can make it work if you want to be there. You'll make time and you'll make money for what's most important.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, those six leadership trainings that I mentioned as the core really just open Pandora's box, because if we're going to take spiritual formation seriously, um, then we're going to take special education seriously. And if we take spiritual formation seriously, then we're going to take our instructional design and our own teacher training practices spiritually. So we've then launched a lot of trainings based on the leadership series. And so we have a whole training just on finance, a whole training on instructional design, on special education, on crisis management and communications, and all these things. So like I said, whatever a particular school might be struggling with or where they want to learn, I love that call to just always be improving. I love, again, we think that Christian education should set the standard for educational excellence in this country. So until we do, we have to be practicing holy discontent to continue to get better.
Love that, and I agree. I have two more questions for you before we wrap up for today. So you already shared one of them. We talked about the lady who could sleep out, after 6 months.
Yes.
So that's a success story. Do you have any other cool, quick success stories you can share for those that are listening?
Yes, so many, too many to name, and probably some out there that I don't even know about, which is just incredible to think about. Let me give you one statistic and one quick story. Statistically, I mentioned our donor development training, and this one was really important to the board because, like I said, going back to those early days of how are we going to give and how are we going to leverage giving, not just to build buildings, but to have a bigger impact than we could even ever imagine, was the concept of, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so this has kind of been ringing in the back of our minds for 5 years, which is why the first training we launched was donor development. So if Stan left X amount of money, we want that to bring in 10 times, 100 times what we could give ourselves. And so we commissioned a third-party study last year to research the impact of our donor development training. We wanted to know that what we're spending money on was actually working, which is why I'm really passionate about effective philanthropy, because I think very often it's easy to write the check. It's harder to measure an ROI on giving. And so donor development was one where we can measure this impact, or we can hope to measure this impact. Maybe it's not working, and then we'd have to redesign it all. So we had a third-party group come in, and they sent out a study, a survey to schools that attended our donor development trainings in 2021 and 2022. So schools that have had at least 12 months to implement. And a few of the questions that they asked some very specific questions about donor development disciplines that we practiced, or that we teach that schools should practice. But they also asked the simple question of, what was your average monthly donor revenue before attending the Herzog training? And what is it now, 12 months later? And so the average monthly donor revenue prior to attending a Herzog training for most schools, we had about 300 respondents, was right at $9,000 a month. Okay. So then we asked, again, 12 months later, after implementing what you've learned at the donor development training, what is your average donor revenue today? And in 12 months, they're now reporting that their average monthly donor revenue is $19,500.
Wow.
That's only after 12 months. And so we just know that that's going to continue to exponentially grow, because these schools are really shepherding and stewarding donors well relationally. And that just jazzes me, because when we think about an ROI, we've spent, let's say, each seat's about $1,200, and we ask every school to bring 2 people. So let's say a school of 2 people comes to donor development training. That's an investment of $2,400 on our part. And 12 months from now, they're bringing in an extra $120,000 a year. Are you kidding me? That just lights me up, because I'm so passionate about donors seeing the importance of Christian education, just like Stan Herzog did. And so really exciting on the donor development that these trainings are effective if the school leaders implement, but we train in a way that's just really simple and really practical. So that's my statistic. From 9,000 to 19,005 in donor revenue was the average increase. And so we're really, really jazzed about that.
That's
Really
awesome.
jazzed about that. And then just a quick story. We had a woman named Latasha start coming to our trainings in 2022. And she leads a small Christian school in Sylva, North Carolina, which is about as far west in North Carolina as you can get. And when she came to us in those early days, she came to a culture training and she sat with one of our coaches. And she told this coach, she said, I don't know what I'm doing as the head of school. I just want to get back to the classroom. And oftentimes we hear that because, again, people get into Christian education because they love the students, they love classroom, they're trained as an educator, and now they're balancing budgets and preparing board agendas. And it's not, you've moved from loving on students all day to being in the business of the adult culture, and that's a huge shift. And so Latasha was ready to make that jump back into the classroom. And our coach said, Latasha, Christian education needs you. It needs you to be in the role that you're in and to do the hard thing, to take the risks on the best practices that we're teaching you. And I'm so pleased to say that Latasha's not only still head of school there, but that school is absolutely thriving. They have a beautiful elementary choir. They're starting a Christian high school this year, which is really needed in their community. They've continued to grow by, I think, somewhere between 20 and 30% the last couple of years, which is unheard of. I mean, we're still seeing good growth rates, and I would say a good growth rate is even somewhere around 5 to 10%, but she's seeing some years 20 to 30. Wow. And she completely changed the financial modeling of her school, which is making her able to give more financial aid and make Christian education more accessible in her community. And now today she serves as a Herzog coach. And so she came from about to quit and go back to the classroom 3 years ago to being a model school for our work. And so I just want to say, if you resonate with Latasha's story, just to hang in there and do the hard work of leadership.
Love it. I love the donor development win on that one. That's huge. I was actually not expecting even $9,000 to be what the average would be. So that was even, I was like, hey, that's pretty good. And then 19 is obviously extra $100,000 a year. You can do a lot with $100,000 a year. So that is a huge win. And I met Latasha at one of the trainings, and she is awesome and delightful. So really cool win story there. So make sure we don't get cut off short here. I'd love to share one final piece of advice. I want to hear one final piece of advice from you for all the school leaders listening before we wrap up today.
Yeah, thank you. This is a big question because I just love Christian education so deeply, and I feel indebted to every school leader that we have the opportunity to serve. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here. We believe that Christian education is the last light on in the building of Western civilization. That's a quote from a gentleman named Charles Malik, who said that in a speech at Wheaton College in 1985. And I just think to myself, if Christian education had heeded that in 1985, if Christian parents and churches had heeded that in 1985, that maybe we wouldn't have seen the mess that we started to see in 2019, 2020 when COVID hit. And the reason I go back to COVID is, in the early days, another trend that I heard a lot of, it was a fear that came up and surfaced in a lot of our conversations in those early days, was this fear of, yes, we're seeing an influx of students and all of this enrollment growth right now, but what happens in 2 years when the public school reverses their mask mandate and things seem to go back to normal? What happens when those families leave? And this was a real fear that a lot of people had in those early days. And I fundamentally disagreed with it, but it's hard to tell somebody who's afraid that they're wrong for being afraid of it. I fundamentally disagreed with it because I believe that while parents are coming in droves to Christian education because of what they're running from, they're staying because of who Christian schools are running toward. And if we stay focused on running towards Christ, what comes with that as an educational institution is that we are going to provide the best academics, that we are going to provide top quality programs, But Christian education, the magic of Christian education is in the margin. It is in the ability to meet a student who has failed for the first time with grace and encouragement. It's in the margin to meet the student who just broke up with her boyfriend with the truth that she is valued and that she is loved. It's the ability to meet students who have had a loss, whether that be a family or friend, and say the most important thing that we can do today is not diagram this sentence, but talk about how death is not the end. And I think for me, as Christian schools, it's so important to understand that the product of our school, what we can control, is not the student. We want a very clearly defined goal for our students, whether it's Portrait of a Graduate or student outcomes, whatever you want to call it. We want a very clearly defined goal because you can build on that. But what we can control is providing the best, most Christ-centered, excellent educational environment in which to develop those students. And how do you do that? By investing in your people. By ensuring that our schools are filled with joy, that our schools are filled with people who are willing to challenge students and willing to engage in hard conversations. And so my encouragement is that people matter most. And so that starts with the board supporting the head of school so that the head of schools can support their educators and create an environment that parents want their child to be in, which is joyful, which is dignifying for the student and child, which is value aligned, and which maintains this idea that students are worth investing in and meeting where they're at. And so my final encouragement here is invest in your people. If you're a head of school who feels like you're not being invested in, let Herzog do that. Let us help you get your board on board with that. And if you are a head of school who just wants to continue to grow, my encouragement to you is grow through lifting your people up. You often hear that I have a lot of coaches and just people in my life who have said, have you heard the phrase, leadership is about letting people down at a rate that they can handle. Have you heard this?
No.
And there's some truth to it, of course. And I think a lot of people resonate with that because sometimes it feels just like one meeting or one day after the next, you're just like letting the next person down. But I woke up the other morning just kind of enraged about this statement because I think as Christians, especially in Christian institutions, leadership should be about lifting people up at a rate that they can handle. So that's my final encouragement is lift people up, invest in people around you, because that educator is going to make a difference in the life of a student. And those students are the next leaders and world changers.
Amen. Man, I love it. Sadie, thank you for obviously all your years you're putting into Herzog. And I know you're going to be there, I would hope, for years and years to come. And so thank you for your story and for what all you're doing to help Christian education grow. Appreciate your time today. And appreciate your, obviously, the Herzog's partnership with the School Success Podcast and what you guys are partnered in us with doing. So thank you. And wishing you guys nothing but the best in what you continue to do.
Thank you, Mitchell. We're big fans of you and what you're doing at School Success. So thanks for having me on today.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Sadie for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what her and the entire team at the Herzog Foundation are doing. Wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow the organization and help more and more Christian educators and schools across the United States. And obviously, I'm a big fan of theirs. Love what they're doing. So if you guys have not heard about the Herzog Foundation, well, obviously go check out their website and get to know all the different classes and resources that they provide and are there for them. And I'm hoping that today you were able to learn at least one thing that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And maybe the biggest thing you took away is like, man, I need to take advantage of some free resources and training that the Herzog Foundation makes available to me. So please go check those out and use them. They are fantastic. As we talked about in the podcast today, you will not be disappointed. All right. Well, before you guys go today, I want to highlight our 3 free resources that we have available for you guys. And of course, the podcast is the first one. We are dropping episodes every single Monday morning. We want to make sure you guys are tuning in and not missing those. So I know you've heard the spiel from other podcasts and of course our podcast too. We'd love you to subscribe. We'd love a 5-star review. It really does mean a lot to us and it helps us be able to get the podcast to more people. So if you haven't done that yet, we would love you to subscribe. And then, of course, give us a 5-star review if you're loving the content that we're putting out. It was, of course, made possible by the Herzog Foundation to be able to bring this podcast to you guys every single week. So hope you guys continue to tune in and have fun with this because we're having fun with it. The second one is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner, there is a button, the School Success Report. You can subscribe to that and get that sent to your inbox every single week. Different articles our team has put together and written or found online. We do some teacher shout-outs in there as well. It's just a fun report that you can get every week to kind of further your education in education and get to know what's going on in the school world and make yourself better. And that is one way to do it for free every single week. And then last but not least is our free private Facebook community called School Success Makers. If you're not yet in there, we would love you to be in there. I'm personally in there, and I would love to get to know you and see what you're doing at your school. And if there's anything you need help with, you can put that in the community, and you can have other school leaders chime in to give advice or help you and comment and like what you're doing. And it's a great place to build community. And we all know community is very, very important, but you do have to work at it. And so joining there and starting to share and chime in there is a great way to build community. All right, enough talking to myself here. I'm going to pass it off to next week's episode here. So guys, so glad you're here. We will be back next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.